So today, for the first time in quite a long time, we have an interview on Geeknights. Isn't that amazing?
I can't believe this day has come.
I can't believe this day has come either. So, for the first interview Geeknights has done in, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe even over a year.
Since Jeff to Tarek.
Since Jeff to Tarek, we have with us someone you may or may not know, Tarn Adams.
Hey, I'm Tarn Adams.
Woot! All right.
That's right.
Most of you probably have no idea who Tarn Adams is, but he is are you the only developer of Dwarf Fortress?
I'm the only programmer, but I actually I designed it with my brother. We just kind of been working on games, our whole lives or whatever. So it's sort of organic at this point. It's like we share the same brain or something. But he doesn't like programming so much anymore. So I kind of do the grunt work, but then we just talk about it at night or whatever, like what's going on with the game and where we want to take it and where things are going and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I mean, I'll probably be saying we or I at random throughout the entire interview. It's like we want to do this, and then I did this, and that kind of thing. So if I sound really confusing or I sound like I'm some kind of British monarch or something, then that's the reason.
All right. So for our listeners who may not be familiar with Dwarf Fortress, can you give a brief synopsis of what it is exactly?
Well, I mean, so the game right now is, I mean, it's according to the version number, it's about 27% done. So there's what the game is and what we want it to be. So ideally, the Dwarf Fortress is a fantasy world simulator. So the game would create a world, run its history up through some point, and then you can kind of jump in, assume whatever role you like, and just kind of be a part of that and actually have an effect on a persistent universe. And then you can come back, see what's happened, see how things have changed, and interact it with some more. And without having a fixed plot or anything that's scripted. And we just kind of wanted to see how far we could take that. So we're not there at this point. I mean, and you hear things like that all the time. This is going to be the next big game is going to, react to what the user does and so on and so. And I don't want to overhype it. That's, we're not there right now. But what we've got now, we do have this world that's generated, but the kind of roles that you can assume right now are pretty limited, and it's called Dwarf Fortress right now because the principal thing you can do with the game is once you've got this world sitting there with various little human empires and elves and kind of standard stuff, then you can start an outpost in the mountains, and it's pretty free form. You just start. You can start anywhere you like, but let's say you start at a cliff face, and you have 7 dwarves right now, and you have a wagon of supplies, and you can dig into the mountain, mine. You get rocks left behind that you can make crafts out of, and so on. And you can cut down trees, make little structures and do things. I mean, I'm not quite sure what to liken it to. I mean, parts of it play like an RTS, and parts of it play like Dig Dug. I don't really know, but you can you just build yourself up, and then immigrants will come and make your fortress larger, and you have the kind of standard fantasy things to deal with, like dragons and armies of monsters and stuff like that as you grow your outpost. And there's quite a bit to do there. We tried to kind of put in details where we could, like scrapping hit points, for example, and replacing it with actual body parts and things that happen to them having specific effects and so on. And then the kind of overarching thing that leads back to where we want the game to go is that once the fortress, you always lose the game. As long as you keep playing, it's eventually going to fall apart somehow. And then your fortress is left behind in this world that you've generated. And you have a few options then. Right now you can reclaim the fortress. That means send some more dwarves there. There could be some critters living there depending on the version of the game you're playing. And then you can kind of start your settlement again and get it going again. Alternatively, there's another mode of the game called Adventure Mode, where you have more of a it's sort of unformed right now, but you have the beginnings of an RPG where you actually can create a single character that say starts in a one of the human towns, and then you can wander around the world, doing very few things right now aside from just killing things or being quest to kill a few monsters. But you can also visit your old fortress, and this is kind of where we're achieving some of the goals we had set for ourselves. So you can bring your adventurer back to your old fortress. You can see all of the items that your dwarves had made, the things that your dwarves had built. If there's engravings on the wall, that your dwarves had made, it'll give you some very specific details about what historical events they've depicted. Stuff like that that kind of leads to this universe becoming more alive over several plays. And you can also do things like, if your adventurer gets killed by some monster and then you go meet it again with another monster, the monster will kind of bring up the old adventurer and how he died, and how he screamed like a little baby or whatever, it just kind of, it's sort of the things that harkens back to these really old kind of first roguelike games, where it would sort of these text games where it would save that your character had died and then you could find their body afterward, and their items and their ghost or whatever. And so we've kind of taken that sort of idea, this sort of persistence to an extreme now. Because we've always, I'm doing it. We've always liked these games. I don't think my brother will mind if I speak for him occasionally, but we've always liked these games where there persistent effects, even if it's just losing. I guess it's because we just played in the arcade so much. I wouldn't really trace it back to the roguelike game so much as just, playing Gauntlet and losing or something. And where there's a sort of a permanent effect, but then there's a record of what you've done, which would be something like a high score list. And so we've always liked having a game where you have sort of a permanent effect. It carries on, but what you're doing isn't just based on sort of save, load, save, load, save, load, go back to the checkpoint, that kind of thing, where you're just sort of grinding through someone's story. Instead, you're sort of making your own. But yeah, I guess that's the blurb.
Well,
Is that right?
I find it interesting. I think this is what I find most fascinating about Dwarf Fortress. You talk about how playing the game, you will eventually lose. You will always lose. And I remember on the website, it is mentioned frequently that losing is fun, and this is repeated like a mantra. I guess
It'd be depressing if you don't. If you're like, if it's not fun. It's kind of. Well, there's when I say the other thing is I've tried to, in this kind of PR thing, trying to make people feel comfortable with the concept. The other thing is, I say that you're not playing your fortress, or you're not playing your adventure. You're really playing the world. You create a world, and now if the world's destroyed or the save gets corrupted or something, that is tragic and sad. But if you just lose an adventure or something, every single time you lose the game, your world becomes enriched. This world that you're playing, it just becomes. I could create, or someone writing a plot for a game could create a story, but you can only become so invested in that. I've never actually cared for stories in games so much. I always found it more moving to read a book or something rather than the story in a video game, because oftentimes in a video game, something might be building up, but then you have to play it 6 more times until you kill the thing correctly, and then you get to see the next part or something. So this way, we've kind of removed any of that sort of blockage to making the stories proceed, and so you can kind of, and you'll be much more invested in things that you've actually experienced yourself, and then. If some kind of Etten comes back and it starts arguing with itself about, how tasty your last adventure was, that'll mean something to you, because you'll actually who he's talking about, and you'll have actually played that character previously, rather than just having it be some sort of NPC that you're supposed to care about or something. But yeah, well, yeah.
Okay, so how and when did this crazy thing get started?
Okay, so yeah, I started that like yes, okay, now it's time for me to read my narrative. No, it's well, because I mean it's sort of tricky because there was this other game that I kind of removed the links for it. You can still find it, but the I mean you might notice that Dwarf Fortress is actually called Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 2, Dwarf
Yep.
Fortress. And so what is this Slaves to Armok? Well, that was our fantasy game. So we've always had this notion, meaning my brother and I, and actually in high school, another of our friends, where that was Alan. We'd talk about this fantasy game that we wanted to write, and it kind of stems from the sort of disappointments that we'd had as gaming sort of entered the early and mid 90s, where it wasn't it didn't seem like it was moving forward quite so fast as it had been before. There'd always be these new games coming out that try these wildly new things. And then it just kind of was just not moving forward fast enough or something conceptually. So we were like, okay, I think it comes out of playing some of these role-playing games like, I don't know, what was it, Cyberpunk or something, where the was the first one we played. I know there's a bunch of them, but the first one we played that didn't just have straight hit points or something. And so we're like, why don't computer games do this? They can take advantage of that a lot better than actual pen and paper stuff can, as far as grinding through calculations to see if you can walk anymore and stuff like that. Um, so we had these a bunch of ideas about what a fantasy game could look like, and we're getting kind of tired of buying a game and then in 3 hours you've won it. Happened with the King's Quest type games just from the beginning. It's always just sort of been disappointing. So we had this idea, and this is where the original game, it was because we were limited to 8 letters back then. It was called Drag Slay, for Dragon Slayer, and it's it's kind of like the adventure mode version of Dwarf Fortress, except parts were more fleshed out and parts were less fleshed out. It was just more adventure centered. And so we kind of introduced our damage system. It's not quite the same, but basically the same as it is in Dwarf Fortress, and some other persistent effects and so on. I never released this. It was just when I was learning how to do C. It was one of the first games I made when I was in high school, and that continued up until I was about a sophomore in college, I guess. And then we're like, all right, the Dragsley code's kind of dead because we're on some kind of Borland compiler where it wouldn't let you have more than 65K of something or other, and so I just had to ditch it. And then I started learning more graphics stuff. You couldn't tell from looking at Dwarf Fortress, but was actually making some 2D, 3D type stuff. Nothing impressive, but just learning the ropes or whatever. And I mean, we had various games trying to get started. I've got a graveyard of just bizarre dead projects, hundreds of them. And,
You're not alone.
occasionally something, yeah, and occasionally something will stick, right? But I guess it was maybe 1999, 2000 or something. Uh, I started the Slaves to Armok, God of Blood, the second version of that. The first one was this one where it's sort of it's sort of, I wouldn't call it isometric, but just kind of looking sort of down like that. These little animated characters in VGA running around killing each other in this 10 by 10 maze where they just kind of drop down and they walk around. We had about 200 animation frames for them. They weren't 3D though; they were just a bunch of rotated bitmaps. And they'd walk around wearing loincloths, the goblins and humans, and they'd run around trying to find the sword so that they could wrestle each other to the ground and just punch each other in the face with it, the sword that is. And it was like, okay, so I mean, that didn't go anywhere. And then so I wrote another game called Slaves to Armor, God of Blood, and this one actually started doing well. Not well, meaning that I actually got some code down again. Since Dragslay, I hadn't really done that with a fantasy game. And this is when I went online. That was when I started grad school. So I went online in 2000, and that I put that game up, and I'm like, okay, it was just total alpha. It's like just being able to walk around or something. There wasn't very much to it at all, but it had all these. I mean, the creature definitions were over specified. You could say how patchy someone's hair was on their arm, and then what material the hair was made out of, and what its density was and its color and whether it was striped and so on. and it kind of could generate random monsters and tell them how to walk with their. I had little 3D models eventually, and it was kind of like a really bad version of Spore, but you could walk on your hand, or you could walk on one leg, or walk on your head and one leg or something, and it would kind of bend the model and stuff to do that. But I was really focused on these really this minutia. But that was all of our fantasy game design stuff was being invested in that. And I put up these huge development pages, it's kind of like the ones I got now for Dwarf Fortress. These things are just paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs saying, oh, what do we want to do? What do we want to do? And my brother and I, my brother Zach, would write these stories and just kind of look at them and say, okay, now if we wanted this to happen in a game, exactly what game mechanics would we need to make this game happen? If you're like, yeah, the adventurer was running around a cave and this giant bear attacked him, and then they wrestled for a while, and eventually somehow the adventurer managed to beat the bear to death with a stick, which wouldn't happen, of course. But then he skinned the bear, put on the bear's skin, and ran outside or something. It's very simple. It's not, I wouldn't call that a rewarding game experience, but if it was pulled off well, it would be. But there's already just in that stupid little anecdote or whatever, there's dozens of game mechanics that you need to make that happen. Because I mean, like I said before, we aren't really into sort of scripting what would happen, so that it would just be something that happened on like level 3. You meet the big grizzly bear, and then you kill it, and then you get the item bear pelt or something because you're victorious or something. But so we just had all these plans, and you really learn early on that when you're making games, that ideas, it's kind of like dime a dozen, right? It's not, I mean, everyone's got ideas for games. Everyone wants to, not everyone, but you play games long enough and you get a bunch of ideas about how you'd make them better. But actually sitting down and doing it's a chore. I mean, it's a lot of work. So we had all these ideas, and we actually, I mean, we started to proceed with it, but the game started getting bogged down for a variety of reasons. This is the original Armok. I was messing with 3D graphics way too early in the development, so I was just getting too concerned about how things would end up looking, and I didn't really think about the larger scope of the game when I was messing around with these little details. And so that game was kind of grinding along, and it had a bunch of bugs, and I hadn't really programmed. This was the first game I released. Well, aside from this tragic game we released on AOL in 1996 that we don't need to talk about. But
Now I'm interested.
I may have played that game.
yeah, who knows? It's like it was like kind of like what's that game? Attacks with like you move the circle and then it converts all the other circles next to it. You can find it in bars sometimes, and it was kind of like that. It was called Loser Ball. But it was a horrible game. We wrote it when we were in high school, so people played it. Yeah, well,
I remember going on AOL and going to the games, and there'd be that list of games you could get, and you download
Yeah.
every single one you've never downloaded before, and
Unless you had a 2400 baud modem like me.
yeah.
Yeah, we got an email actually from some soldiers in Iraq in like 2005. And they were like, "Yeah, we're playing this game Loser Ball. It's really great." And I was like,
Wow.
"Oh man, that was crazy." But yeah, so I had never really had to work with actually having people play my games aside from my friends. So it was an educational experience. But that game was sort of sputtering, and this was over a period of years. I released that in 2000, the first Armok in 2000. And that went up to, say, I don't quite remember, it'd be 2004 or 5 or 6. It was just kind of going along well. I mean, and during that time I released various small projects, just kind of as jokes mostly. I mean, I think almost every other project on the webpage right now is a joke of some kind. And so that was where our fantasy game was. We always wanted to write this fantasy game, and that's kind of what was happening to it. Now, at the same time, in 2002, in October, I had this other game sitting around called that I didn't release called Mutant Miner, where it kind of there's this game called VGA Miner, which is a pretty simple game. You have a grid that you look at. You're looking at a cross section of a mountain with it has this little store or something on top and a little miner, and you can go down this elevator, and then you can kind of dig in again like Dig Dug or something at any stage. I think it was turn-based though, and dig a hole in the mountain, and find there's little hazards, or you could find jewels and bring them back. So I'm like, okay, that game. It kind of gave me an idea to write something like that. This is again just a silly game I was writing, um, in just an ASCII game where you would have a miner and you'd mine down into the rocks and get some kind of radioactive material, and then you'd go back up and apply it to yourself so you could grow more arms and stuff. Bear with me, and and, and and go down and fight various creatures down there and stuff. It's just kind of this weird thing, sort of like a roguelike game or something, but it just this very weird game that I was just messing around with because I just have hundreds of these little projects where I just see how something goes. And then I was like, worked on that for about a week, and then I was like, well, you know, wouldn't it be wouldn't it be better if you were kind of mining, but you were just dwarves or something? You had more because I started with Mutant Miner was turn based, and you could get more miners, but then you'd be controlling two things in a turn based mode, and then that just ends up like one of those old SSI games. It gets really boring. Where you just like move this guy and then move this guy, and there's like 50 orcs, and it takes forever. So I was like, okay, this needs to be real time, and then I kind of got this idea to make it more like dwarves, like like you're controlling dwarves instead of this weird mutant crap. And I'm like, it would be fun just to kind of have a cliff face that you mine into, and you can hit various metals and so on, but there are just threats in the mountain and so on, and you can make crafts and so on. And then I had that other the kind of the main idea from our perspective, which was now what if you could abandon that cave, and then we always had this idea of like I was saying, persistent score lists and so on, and information about what happened after you die. Like I had this other game, which was what was that one called? That one Beast. No, that wasn't Beast Maimers. That was a different one. It was Fantasy Slaughter. Fantasy Slaughter.
There we
Uh,
go.
it,
That's my
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
game.
yeah. Yeah, so it had this one was you had just a bunch of kind of cards, just these boxes, and they'd say things like forest on them, and then you click on that and it expands it into eight more cards, which would be like a grove or a cave or whatever, and you can you fight opponents and so on. Pretty simple, but the main thing was that when you died, instead of just saying okay, you got 200 points, enter your name, you could click on your character and it would give a huge list of everything that had happened, um, and all the creatures that you'd fought, and it would have another score list. Let's say the guy who's killed the most goblins, the guy who's killed the most dragons, which the person who had the highest strength or whatever, and it had all of these kind of charts and lists and stuff. And so I was thinking in this Dwarfs game, originally this Dwarfs game that was just made off Mutant Miner was going to be something short. I'd released a bunch of projects by then, so I was like, okay, let me release another little game while I'm kind of grinding through this Armok game. So I was working on Dwarves. I'm like, okay, now how can we do a score list for this game? You want to say how many crafts you've got and what kind of monsters you've killed and so on. And so I was like, well, wouldn't it be cool if you could go in there after you've lost, go in with an adventurer and have the adventurer kind of find things, like find a piece of a logbook that says what was produced, or somebody's diary or something. Just find all these little things, and or pick up a golden goblet, and then bring it back to some just town menu, not even a place you could walk around, and just turn that in. And the more things you find as you play your dwarf thing, the more information you have about the main game, the dwarf game that you had played. And so this was going to be a short little sort of 2 month project that just kind of showed a new way of handling a high score list, just something interesting like that. And so right after I thought of that, I called up my brother and we talked about it for 3 days, just kind of not sleeping at all, just all the different things you could do with a mechanism like that. And it basically grew into something where we were like, yeah, but we're working on Armok, and this is kind of turning into another fantasy game, and we're just kind of stepping on our our own toes by working on this. We always have this problem where we come up with an idea, but they can always be merged into some other mammoth project or whatever. And so we sort of shelved Dwarves for a while. I worked on it in October 2002 and November, and then just sort of shelved it. Went back to Armok, and did various other games that are floating around online. I don't remember the timeline, but there's games like World War One Medic and Liberal Crime Squad and all those sub games like Fuck You and stuff. And the the dwarves kind of dropped off for a while, and then around, I don't remember, 2004 or something, Armok was obviously sputtering at that time, and so we decided, okay, we're gonna go with this ASCII game, not mess around with this 3D crap anymore. Maybe later, when things are more settled. And so we started pushing all of our fantasy ideas into Dwarf Fortress, and this time we're sort of keeping in mind that we should have a skeleton of the larger game. Like get the world down early, get the civilizations down early instead of trying to build it up from the bottom. So kind of have a more flesh out the skeleton approach rather than starting from the bottom and working up. And so those ideas merged, and then we're just suddenly back on track with our fantasy game, and worked on that for a year or two and released it in August of 2006. And we've just kind of been working on that project ever since.
So to get back to the game itself specifically, I do notice one thing when I load it up to play it, that it takes over one of my cores and it uses it as much as it can. So it seems like there's a lot going on under the hood in this game.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, whether or not that's my fault or that's a good thing is probably a kind of a 50-50 thing. I mean, I have no training as a programmer. I mean, when I went to school, I I took some computer classes or whatever, just the ones that I went to University of Washington for my undergrad, and they don't let you take computer classes unless you're a computer major, aside from say the lower the like intro to C or whatever. And so I took all those and didn't really learn anything because I knew that stuff, but I couldn't really learn anything fancy. Of course, you can learn online, and I've been doing that, but you always have holes and problems and stuff. I mean, I'm getting better at it, but I wouldn't call myself a programmer by any stretch of the imagination. And so, yeah, I mean, there's going to be problems. I mean, I've been, looking at optimizing stuff, but sometimes that feels premature too, since so much is changing all the time. But yeah, there's a lot going on. I mean, during the if you whether you're talking about when you're playing the game itself, I mean, it's doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, aside from the stuff that you'd expect, like pathfinding and so on, I mean, it's worrying about weather patterns in the world itself, because if the world is kind of running at the same time, it's not running too hard because you can't really devote too much processor to that. But things will occasionally make little decisions, not so much right now because that's what I just started working on, is this whole army thing. But weather's important. It's not that important, but later on, if there's hurricanes and tornadoes and stuff, it'll be more important to have that stuff traced accurately. And it spends, say it's devoting, 5, 6, 7% to this weather sim, and there's other things like that it's just got running. And I basically make it do as much as I can get away with on my own machine and still sort of play it comfortably. But yeah, it's just, I mean, it'll take what you give it basically. Uh, and the game itself that you're actually playing, like, having 100 dwarves trying to figure out where they want to go and what they want to do and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if your map is like 400 by 400, then well, now there's three coordinates, so 400 by 400 by 10 or something, then the pathfinding is expensive, and you've got these fluids. The fluids, if you've got an actual river flowing and then you divert it, and you've got all this water flowing around, yeah, it's gonna eat your processor up. And I don't know the first thing about multi-threading an application. So if it's killing one of your cores, that's because I don't know how to make it kill half of both your cores or something. But
Well, actually, I have a kind of a quick question here, because it seems like if everything's so complex and there is a lot going on. And have your dwarves, when you've been developing or watching the game, ever done unexpected things?
well, I mean, there's all kinds of categories, right? Right. there's the category of, so what you the you know the what we're all trying to make happen, emergent behavior. It's just, not really. That hasn't happened so much for me. I kind of understand why they're doing what they're doing. But if so there's a bug report, for instance, a farmer walked over to a storeroom, picked up a bed, walked over to the fields, and then planted it. And like, I would say I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that at all. I wouldn't expect that in 1,000 years, but it happened.
Did it grow a bed
And
tree or?
nah, it just sat there like you'd expect.
Yeah.
It's like just planted the bed.
The other dwarves are
And
standing around. What do we do with him?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I. So I guess the answer to the question is yes. There's things like that all the time. It's just, I mean, people on the forums have kind of remarked that the game, when it has bugs, and it does, of course, lots of bugs, especially since this latest big release, that they can be, spectacular and funny and stuff, just crazy things like that. People spontaneously exploding because some temperature variable is wrong or whatever. And the upside to that, though, is that when things are working right, it all just kind of makes a little bit more sense or whatever. And things that are unexpected can happen. Uh, so it's yeah, that's
So, for a game of, this variety, it's relatively popular, and there's a lot of people, especially in like, the indie game scene, who are very they're very critically acclaiming it, if you will. So was that like a surprise? Like when did you notice that, oh, people actually like this?
Yeah, well, it's kind of. I mean, it was a pleasant surprise. I mean, I didn't expect it to catch on quite so much. I mean, I expected it to be, because I kind of could play what I had sitting there, and I knew it was better than anything else I'd released, which isn't saying much. Then I knew it would go over all right, but mostly just with people that were already playing my other games. I just thought they'd like it more. But the second we released it, that was August 8th, 2006. Immediately people would just post it all over these bulletin boards, and I got to learn how to use my website's referrals function, and you see all these just threads everywhere and stuff, and it's just kind of, people talking about it everywhere. And I had no experience with that kind of thing, no experience with. Uh, I'd never seen that happen. I don't really frequent any bulletin boards or anything, so I'd never, seen how this sort of word of mouth can spread stuff. And that was yes, that was a total surprise. Um, I knew we had something interesting, but I didn't know how well it would be received, and especially because things like, it doesn't have the typical assets you'd associate with a successful game. I mean, I wouldn't exactly call it. I mean, it's not. I mean, it's not a successful game really, because I mean, what if you have, several thousand downloads, it's still a drop in the bucket. But the people that can tolerate the graphics and can somehow manage to, get their certification on the interface, and play it, they appreciate it. And I think because it's unusual and there's not a lot of things like it, that they seem to talk about it a lot, which it's kind of interesting because, I'm fairly antisocial when it comes to my games. I don't really play MMOs, and I don't play multiplayer stuff. I mean, I hardly play anything anymore, but just never really got into that whole scene. And so for a game like Dwarf Fortress, which is designed as sort of the ultimate anti-social game, because it's basically like an MMO. You don't have to play with other people, in a sense. That's what we're shooting for. It's not that right now, but we're trying to make kind of this living world without people. That people would still talk so much about it, and so it was. I mean, it was very gratifying to see that happen, and surprising.
Now,
Uh,
programming considerations completely aside, would you think it would be interesting if someday, if somehow a game like this would work where multiple people existed in the same world at the same time? Or is that just completely beyond what you care about right now?
Well, yeah. Well, okay. So I guess there's a bunch of different aspects to that. Now, what I personally care about, I don't care at all. Like multiplayer stuff. For some reason, yeah, just not my thing. Not my thing. Because I mean, it can be very rewarding, I guess, to have people there that, if they're really, really, really serious about role playing and not breaking your immersion and stuff, then of course they're better than NPCs. But the second someone talks about, I don't even know how to pronounce that, PWN, like poning you and stuff, or what. I've got a massive toner. It's just like it's. I mean, ah.
I'm actually, I had the same question, but I'm thinking, so much with Dwarf Fortress, I don't imagine it being on the level of, people opponing each other, right? But more like, you have the one big world. It's just that I have my fortress over here, and you have your fortress over there, and our fortresses exist at the same time, and maybe our dwarves will meet each other, and maybe, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I don't mean to cast any aspersions. That's just my own, I just can't get into online things for whatever reason. But people have been great about that stuff. I mean, they've done what they can with what they've got right now, meaning people will save a game and send it to someone else, and then they'll work on it for a year, then they'll save that world and send it to someone else. And they
Ah.
get these kind of succession things going on. Another way that they play on the forums is, okay, I've started a fortress with 7 dwarves, and people sign up, and I'll name them after you or whatever, and then they'll report back their exploits, and you get some huge ones. There's this really popular one where I think this was a succession game, meaning they passed the world on, called Boat Murdered, which came off of Something Awful, I think, and they would just write these narratives in character about what happened on their turn, and then they'd pass it along, and it was really funny. It's and they, so people who are social, I'm an exception here, will do things with other people with what they've got, and it would be, in a kind of ideal universe, it would be great if they could do whatever they wanted with the game. If they wanted to play in a world with another fortress and then just trade with each other, or if they all wanted to jump in and be dwarves and play one fortress. I mean, I guess it's they were doing that sort of in that game Worm Online. I think that's what it's called. Where they kind of can make their. I mean, it's got a lot of detail with the crafting and so on, and they all make these little settlements and build little houses with each other and dig mine and so on. Um, and so that kind of thing could exist. I mean, I don't see what's so exceptional about Dwarf Fortress in terms of the MMOs or whatever. Just how you'd be able to modify your environment is one thing that I guess is slightly unusual, and the detail with the character arrangements, but I don't see what's so different about. I mean, they have persistent worlds and stuff. I don't know. I've never really played MMOs, so I couldn't tell you what's missing and or really understand your question in the sense that I'm not sure what you're saying that DF would be like versus other MMOs or whatever.
Well, in that, I'm just saying that the players wouldn't necessarily be competing with each other. They would just sort of be, you would be basically enriching the world twice as quickly, or because more people would be enriching the same exact world rather than, because a lot of MMOs today, the world doesn't get enriched. The world is controlled by the developers, and it's just people are walking around looking at it, sort of like what you didn't like. But, with Dwarf Fortress, if more people were in the same world at the same time, it would sort of.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing that kind of reminds me of Worm Online. I don't know if you
Yeah.
guys have seen that one.
Nah, never heard of it.
Yeah, it's you might, I think it's WURM, but I don't know. There's so many ways to spell worm, that I don't remember how they spell it. You can use a Y, you can use a U, you can use an O,
Yeah, it's
but
a U. I just searched for it. Okay.
yeah. So that game, I mean, it's not dwarves, of course, and someone remarked that every single character looks like Jonathan Frakes or something, but you can. It's something along those lines. So it's not something that I'd feel like a trailblazer really. And I think some people do
Hmm.
have some interesting ideas there that they're kind of running with. But uh, at the same time, it didn't. I mean, it doesn't have the same kind of. I mean, uh, yeah. Well, I didn't want to hype my ultimate goals too much. But it's like what I'm hoping to do is take it beyond sort of a settlement building game and really get some kind of plot arc type of things that develop naturally just through the motivations of the characters involved. But I mean, I always feel a little hesitant talking about some of the things that I want to do because you get those people like the guys who did the PR for Oblivion. That
Ah,
was just that was just
yep,
ridiculous.
yep.
that whole Radiant AI thing. It's like this guy will take the broom from the other guy and kill him or whatever because he wants the broom. I'm like, what is that? I mean, and they talked about how it was sort of like a wild stallion that was unbridled and they just couldn't control it, so they had to take it out. And it's like, that just sounds more like a garden variety bug or decision error to me or
Yep.
whatever. It's like,
All right.
so yeah, yeah. So yeah,
Well, I
cool.
guess we'll uh have our obligatory discussion of the interface. But first, when I started up the game, the first thing I noticed, even before the amazing world creation thing happens, is the opening animation with the dwarves hitting the thing with the hammer. How did you make that?
I mean, the game, when you're playing the game, it's just a sequence of 80 by 25 ASCII things, and so I just drew those by hand,
Okay.
saved them, and the no, it's just so it's like any movie format. Well, I don't know much about movie formats, but it just has all the frames in a row, and you can compress it however, but the different so I just drew them,
Right.
and it's at different times. Of course, there's sound effects cued. I'm using like the Fmod sound library, and I just record them into a microphone. That the sound there, somehow during grad school I came upon I don't even know how to say it, a sarod or sarod. It's an Indian instrument. It's like a sitar, but it doesn't have frets. And it's like Ali Akbar Khan. They look kind of badass. This giant instrument. And I got one from somebody. And so that's what you hear, that noise. That it's those. I mean, I mostly play the guitar, but that was kind of fun to mess around with. And I think the pick is just me flicking a soda can with my finger or something and messing with it. We'll let it
That's good
pro.
stuff.
But yeah, so I just drew it by hand. It didn't take too long. It took me a while. I had this like piece of paper and all the different frames. There are like 200 frames or something. I just checked them off, just went through it. But there's probably a better way to do it. But I tend to do things the slow and stupid way. But I just keep working on them, get them done.
All right. Well, to get it out of the way, I think we should at least discuss the interface for like a minute or two, because the one thing, when anyone plays this game, regardless of whatever else they say, the game is all ASCII, and I mean, I needed a wiki to figure out how to play. There was it was actually quite an excellent, helpful thing on the wiki to, get me started at least.
Yeah, no,
And
that was yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm
yeah,
interrupting you. I was just going to say the wiki is a wonderful thing. I'm really happy that the community came together and put that together because it's certainly I'd have like 6 players right now if it weren't for that.
yeah, and the one thing that most people, a lot of people try to play the game, and even if they're intrigued by the idea, will be, turned away because it's difficult, or even if they're not turned away, they'll still. It's sort of, your game is infamous for its not so good interface, and you seem to admit it's not so good, but.
Yeah.
What do you have to say to someone who sort of is scared of your game?
Well, okay. So I mean, there's people who are scared of it. And I would, as it stands, I'd say, that you're just a reasonable, rational person having a reasonable, rational reaction to something that's frightening. But and then after that, you know, you can give them. Well, let's just okay. So with the interface, there's a couple things. Number one, the game, the way I'm developing it, just the way I release it, the way I've released it early, is somewhat unusual, right? I mean, you don't see, I mean, if you had to look at projects and all the commercial games you've played, there's not really so many of them that'll release when they're, say, 25% done and
Mm-hmm.
then continue to release after that. And so yeah, it's sort of apples and oranges to compare it to a finished game or to a game that says it's finished and you still throw the ball backwards or whatever. But it's one of those things where I've had to make a decision as far as how much time do I want to spend on the interface, keeping it polished, keeping it so that a person can do exactly what they want to do without thinking about it and without thinking about the interface. And it's just everything works nicely, everything looks nice, you can do what you want to do. There aren't a lot of confusing menus, there aren't a lot of keys that are mapped this way in one place and this way in another place, and you don't know how to scroll or whatever. All those things can be handled, and I'm aware of all those issues. It's not like I'm kind of myopic about it or some kind of autistic savant that doesn't know what an interface is or whatever. But uh, it's difficult for me to justify spending a lot of time keeping it polished when I'm going to gut, 10% of the game here, 10% of the game there, and then suddenly I have to go back and spend 2 weeks retooling
Mm.
the interface. So I just try and keep it at a sort of baseline of playability, which maybe isn't the same baseline other people would have for that, but it saves me a whole lot of time so that I can get where I want to go. Now I've made a concession here. It's not quite the concession people would want. That I've said, this is where version one is. I've kind of distinguished version one and past version one goals. So for instance, people like Magic in their fantasy universes, but there's not going to be any before I get to the interface.
Mm.
And people want to play things besides dwarves. They want to play humans. Of course, they can model this right now, but they want to play humans. They want to play goblins. They want to play a god or whatever. Not going to happen until I get to the interface. So at some point, I am going to sit down and try and get something built on top of the game that will be nice, but at the same time not hamstring me too much when I try and do more. But there's still going to be an element of that, which is why I don't want to rush it. Uh, Anytime you've got a really good interface that's been designed specifically for the game in question, and if the game in question is changing, then it's difficult to keep the interface applicable as you change things without spending time on it. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot I could learn about how to make the interface sort of update itself and work with the ever-changing format. But there's always going to be an element there making me uncomfortable with spending too much time on it. But it's I mean it's not something I have all the answers to though. It's not an easy question, right? I mean, it kind of makes sense, I guess. But I don't know if I missed there was some other element of the question,
No, it's all
though,
right.
I
I
guess.
think you covered it.
Maybe just, yeah, or whatever.
Okay. Well, where do in the long run, not in terms of, how you want the game to develop or, what features you want in the game, but in terms of, do you want to sell the game? Do you want some publisher to sell it? Do you want, to get bought? Do you want to work for some other game company? What do you like? What's
Uh,
your long-term goal here? Or
no,
if you
no,
have
no,
any?
because no, I've had people approach me. They wanted to publish the game and had people want to put ads on the site and all that kind of stuff. I just don't want to. Even I mean, because people have had more ideas that are even more simple. Just like, why don't you sell T-shirts or something? People really want to buy T-shirts or whatever. I just didn't want to get. Hello?
We're here.
Oh yeah, I just heard.
Yeah.
So,
I'd buy a
but
t-shirt
yeah,
with
I
a
just
pixelated dwarf on it.
yeah, no, a lot of people wouldn't. It's cool, but I don't want to be a manager of sales or something, right? I don't want to deal with returns, and I don't want
Mm.
to do that kind of stuff. And as far as, commercializing the game, that sounds like a good way just to throw it down the toilet or whatever, right? It's like the second you get other people involved that have a vested interest in the project, then it becomes, you've got deadlines and
Mm.
you've got to worry about, who are, pleasing your masters and all that kind of thing. And I got out of my job. I quit my job so that I could do this, and I didn't want to have to turn it back into another job or something. So I'm not going to sell any games.
Mm.
We're never going to sell a game.
Right.
And I like how it's set up now. How people can download the game. Anyone, anywhere who's got an internet connection and a computer that has like a 27 gigahertz processor can play the game, and they can download it, play it, try it, and if they like it, if they really like it, if it meets with their satisfaction, they can assign a dollar value to that to the game and send me money. People do that. I'm surprised that last year I actually, made about as much as I made when I was a grad student. It's
Well,
not, you know,
one thing I can definitely say is the community you've got is very dedicated to this game.
yeah. I mean, it's an unusual game, right? So if it's your cup of tea, there's not a lot out there that can compete with it. If it's your thing.
Mm.
I mean, it's not the thing of a lot of people, but the people that do like it, they like it a lot. I mean, it's got a lot of things that people had been wanting or had wanted to see tried, like scrapping hit points and the persistent world, and dynamic fluids, all that kind of stuff that you might have wanted in your games. There's an attempt in Dwarf Fortress, and some of it came off pretty well. So they support that, and yeah, it's pretty cool. And I don't see changing my business model. Now, of course, this is me, talking from a position of relative comfort. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but I can pay rent on it.
Mm.
Now, if I'm driven against the wall, who knows what kind of, creepy, corporate flunky I'll turn into or whatever, right? You never know. Never know, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if I'm suddenly, I mean, I can already see myself saying like, well, if I make just like $200 a month for 3 months, doesn't that mean it's about time to start working on the interface or something? And and the answer to that question is probably yes. Even before then,
Mm.
but it's still I'm trying to remain dedicated to the to my principles here, which is stuff like try before you buy. I really
Mm.
think that's important. People shouldn't have to pay for something because somebody tried to stuff it down their throat or lied about it.
Mm.
Like those things we were talking about with Oblivion and stuff. I
Well,
wouldn't call him a liar, but
all right.
shit.
All right. Well,
Uh,
actually, we're kind of running out of time, so let's just ask like a
that's
few
right.
more. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you thought about taking the game like open source anyway?
That's been a huge discussion on and off here, and of course there are upsides to that, but the main downside is that I don't know what would happen in terms of people branching it or people doing whatever with it, and it's just that unpredictability of it, and the fact that I'm living on this now make me very hesitant to kind of jump into, I feel suddenly very protective of what I've got going. Because I mean, of course, if you release a source, but you're like, don't branch it, and you write some kind of tricky license agreement or something, and you're willing to go to court, and you have money to go to court,
Yep.
and stuff like that, then you can actually, do that, and then all of a sudden you're like some kind of saint or something. It's like, yes, I've released open source for the world or whatever, and everyone should do that. Releasing open source is a great thing, but you don't have certain luxuries sometimes. Yeah, I would. I mean, just at my core, if we were living in some kind of utopia where we all support, where we all where we were all supported, we all had food and stuff like that, basic stuff, then it'd be open source in a second. But we're just not in that situation.
All right, I guess at this point we usually tend to get back away from the normal topic and ask a bunch of geeky personal questions. So, I think the answer may be self-evident, but are you a geek? I mean, you definitely are very dedicated to computer gaming.
Yeah, so there's this. I mean, these terms and all through high school, it's like I've never. I think is because my father didn't really. I mean, just how his life went or whatever. It's always been heavy into not having us. It was just raised sort of not to self-identify with any group of people. So when people use labels and so on, I've never called myself a geek. I'm pretty sure I fit pretty squarely right in the center of there somewhere. But I just don't understand what it means when people say things like, are you a geek? Are you an atheist? Are you a something? Are you a something? It's like, I don't know. It's like the specific questions would really tease that out, I guess. But,
I'm just really interested in how people perceive that word. It seems like everyone we ask has a very different but similarly long-winded answer.
yeah, I got no definition for it, especially when you get like, what is a geek? What is a nerd? That kind of stuff. I don't understand distinctions and stuff, and people get violent over that kind of thing. Violent in the way that they yell at each other and
Yep.
stuff. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know, man. It's just like I like what I like. I mean, if someone fixes cars all day and stuff, I think they're kind of nerdy. It's kind of a geeky thing, right? Cars or
That's what we say.
being about. Yeah, it's like whatever. I don't know.
Mm.
There's some kind of stratification or something that I don't know, man.
Yeah, well, you're obviously, interested in, fantasy and computers and video games. What are the sorts of things you're interested in that you do, or do you do anything else?
Well, okay, so maybe before no, I still do a few things because I've become kind of this monk, right? I mean, I don't leave my house very often. I can go through days without speaking to anybody except for my brother and when we're planning stuff. But just because I've become kind of devoted to the project because it's something I think is kind of worthwhile. But I play the guitar. That was something I picked up in what was that, 2003 or something. I started doing flamenco, but after that, it just kind of turned into stuff that sounds mostly like the Dwarf Fortress music. Just kind of random, eerie sort of stuff, just kind of dipping around. I mean, it's all improvised basically, except I mean, I spent some time on that song a little bit just to make sure, because when you're improvising, it can go well for like 3 or 4 minutes, and then you do something really stupid, and then it doesn't sound so good anymore. But that's something that I've been really into. I guess what other types of geeky things do I do? I got this friend in the UK kind of turned me on to anime and manga and stuff, so I've done some
Yeah.
stuff with that.
Ooh, so what
Look at
anime do you like? Briefly.
Briefly. Yeah, well, so it's like it's difficult to come up with top lists with everything, but I've liked almost all the Miyazaki stuff I've seen.
Oh yeah.
I liked Utena a lot.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty much my
yeah.
favorite show ever done.
Yeah, no, I haven't watched it again. I should watch it again because it was badass. But I just remember I was watching that. We'd kind of put it on at the same time because he's over in the UK and we'd just be on IRC or something, and we put it on at the same time. We're just like, oh, damn, what was that?
We know
And,
that feeling.
yeah, so that was badass. I like Azumanga a lot. That's funny.
Mm.
Various other stuff, I guess. But those are the kind of ones that come off. If someone had to ask me my top three things or whatever, I guess those are it.
So do you play any other video games besides Dwarf Fortress, or maybe you play like tabletop role playing games or something like that?
Yeah, let's see. So when we were younger, we started off on D&D, like the red box, I guess, was the first thing we had, and we played that up through second edition, I guess, and we had, I don't remember what else we had. We had some Marvel stuff. I don't know if we ever played it, and then there was Cyberpunk I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
But we sort of drifted out of that once I think it's because when I was in middle school, my brother was in high school. We had this kind of circle of friends that we grew up with, but then we just started moving. We moved a couple of times, and I didn't really have a group or whatever, and we just kind of dropped out of doing that. And we weren't so much into role playing, I guess. I never really adopted a persona or anything like that. We kind of played it more like we'd play our ideal computer game or whatever when
Yeah.
there wasn't anything at the time. And then we started, once we became capable of not actually doing, but thinking about doing the things we wanted to do on a computer, we just sort of drifted away from that. But I mean, I occasionally played again. I played a Roll Master game once when I was in college, I guess. But nothing for a long while. And as far as other video games, I must have played 1,000 something video games when I was a kid. All kinds of stuff. We just download them off BBSs. We'd have these floppy disks with like 220K basic games on them or whatever. And play in the arcade all the time, just like drop $5, drop $5, drop $5 or whatever. And
Yeah, so you weren't big in the console games, really? Mostly the PC and the
we had,
arcade?
oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, because when I was younger, I don't have a console now, so I tend to forget about it. But no, we had a VIC-20, we had an Atari 2600, we had a Nintendo, and we had a Super Nintendo. I think, and we had tons of games, tons of cartridges, and that stuff was all a lot of fun. I'm not sure I could go back to that now, but and I've seen, people playing PlayStation 2s. I haven't seen much of the new stuff, the newest consoles that just came out. I've seen a Wii in a Best Buy, for example, but I never used one. And I'm not really sure. I haven't played any of that stuff, and it's kind of expensive to get into it now, and I don't think I'd be so into it.
Mm.
But PC games kind of really into stuff in the 80s, and then started dropping out when more of the shooters started coming out, I guess. And when things were just it's the same kind of role-playing game, slightly improved, better graphics. Mechanics got better. I mean, I'm not going to start and talk about how, there's sort of a golden age in the 80s or something, and then everything after that's just crap, and it's all graphics or whatever. It's because things get better. I mean, things have still gotten better. It's just slower than I would have liked. So, I mean, because something like some of the things, if there's good things about Dwarf Fortress, good conceptual things that could have been tried, it's just they should have been tried a long time ago. I
Yeah.
don't see why there's not a lot of stuff like it or something. That's unusual, but so I kind of dropped out. I mean, I'll still occasionally play things that are very sort of special interest, like I'll play Zoo Tycoon or something,
Mm.
because I've always liked zoos. Just go and visit the animals or whatever, so stuff like that. But or just some silly ass flash game where you just do whatever. But none of the real big titles. I mean, I kind of had, I mean, just following the say Ultima or something. Never played Ultima 1. I was too young. Ultima 2 didn't play that. Ultima 3 played that, really liked it. Ultima 4 was awesome. It's one of my favorite computer games. Ultima 5, 6 is still good. Ultima 7 is good. Ultima 7 Part 2, that was good. And then Ultima 8 happened, and we're like, what? Like, I heard someone call it Super Avatar Brothers or whatever. It was like jump puzzles and stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever. I didn't buy 9, so I dropped off that. And then there's things like looking at Bethesda or something. We talked about that a little bit.
Mm.
Daggerfall was a game that made me feel like maybe someone was going to do the right thing or whatever. Someone's going to do, and by that I mean I don't mean that in any kind of moral way, but just like something that I'd like, something that was kind of gonna start moving and making things very, very interesting. And then Morrowind was kind of more scripted and more pretty. I still liked it, but it was not great. And then Oblivion, I just kind of dropped off on them. So this is that kind of thing where I'm just not. I mean, I just wouldn't go out and buy a game these days because it'd just be like, well, it's going to be a shooter, going to be an RTS. Maybe there's something interesting, but it's not going to, blow my mind or anything. And it's probably got DRM that'll eat my computer or something. So
Yep. All
yeah,
right.
that's what
How much
that's where I'm
time
at.
do we have over there?
We should probably wrap it up right about now.
All right. I actually have a question for me. Like I played Dwarf Fortress for like Rim didn't play it actually. He was too scared, but I played
I
it.
read most of the wiki, however, because
Yeah.
the thing is, I find the game fascinating, and I really like reading the wiki
Yeah.
alone was just really interesting to see what other
Oh yeah,
people
no,
have
there,
tried and
yeah,
what
yeah,
happens.
there are people that just read forum threads and stuff. They're like, I can't play this game. I just can't understand it. It's like I'm dyslexic in the ASCII move around or whatever, and I just can't stand it. But uh, I love reading the stories or
Mhm.
whatever, and they just
Yeah.
they'll just kind of talk on my forums and they'll chat with people about the
Mhm.
game and stuff, but they've never played it.
Yeah, but I played it for
Yeah, yeah.
like a couple weeks, and I followed what the wiki said, and I basically got up to right before the wiki was telling me to like make a little farm and make a flood or whatever, and there were two problems I had that where I couldn't continue, and it really I figured out the interface just because I'm good at figuring out interfaces, at least the basics of it, but the first thing was like the moving the rocks out of the digging place. Like I'd want to like put a bed somewhere, but there'd be rocks in the way, and they wouldn't move those rocks out of the way. They'd move some other rocks out of the way. So what am I supposed to do about that?
Yeah, so if you have set up a stone stockpile, a
I
big one,
Yeah,
they're just going to be moving. They're just going to be moving rocks at
I know. I
random, and
noticed that.
it's gonna yeah. So that's kind of one of those things where I'm kind of just trying to decide. I mean, the realism is important, but you shouldn't be a slave to it. So I'm like, what should I do about this? They need rocks or whatever, and so it's one of those things where people basically develop workarounds, and basically you don't want to create a big stone stockpile. Just leave the
Yep.
rocks where they're at, and if you put a bed right on top of the rock and there's not a bunch of stone hauling jobs, then they'll walk over to that bed, move the rock, stick
Oh,
it
will
to the
they?
side. Yeah, they'll
Because
clean the site.
I would say I would try to say put a bed here, and it wouldn't let me do that because there was a rock there. Is it not?
Yeah, and yeah, it's going to depend. I don't know when the last time you played was too, because there's
Uh,
like the versions constantly change, so I have
uh,
to
uh,
keep trying to. But that one's been like that for a while. They'll clean stuff. They'll move it out of the way.
okay.
And most people, not most people, I don't know what percentage, but a lot of people will just leave the rocks because there's a lot of rocks, especially in this new version. There apparently the drop rate went way up, so
There's even more
there.
rocks.
Yeah, it's torment. It's torment. It's one of the big problems, and there are a lot of things like that where there's just all these stumbling blocks along the way, and unless you kind of get specifically either through them yourself or helped by someone else, you could drop the game.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's it's like I'm aware of these things,
Yeah.
sympathetic, and trying to figure out what to do. And but that's
Yeah.
one of the big problems. That's
The
definitely one
other
of the big.
problem I had was that like I would like like what I wanted to do. Like I'm like I want to dig this and this and this and this. I want to put this here and this here and this here and this here and this here, right? But like I couldn't. Like I just want to design like a room full of beds, sort of like in Railroad Tycoon. I wanted to design my roller coaster, but I couldn't do that until the beds were made, and I couldn't.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah, and that's a problem with some of the old the way the jobs work. We have to deal with legacy code. That's part of the problem with Dwarf Fortress. Is you got 5 years worth of crap in there.
It sort of ended up in like a SimCity situation where normally in SimCity you pause the game, you do some stuff, and then you put it in cheetah mode and you walk away. But there isn't cheetah mode. There's pause and go.
You can't do it now because a job right now, the problem with the jobs is a job needs to know what items it's working with before it can begin. And when you place a building, it kind of needs to know. Now, in that I'm saying it needs to know in the code. In real life, back where we want this game to be, you'd be able to do that. And this is definitely going to come to a head and be fixed probably sooner rather than later because of the new constructions and ability to re-wall and place floors and ramps and stairs and build them out of stone. Because people they want to lay down the entire blueprint for like a giant bridge.
Yeah,
or
that's
something,
exactly what I wanted to do.
Tower, right? They just want to wall.
Yep.
I don't
for
care.
Me, that was the most fun part of the game was like designing fortresses and things.
Yeah, and so that's I mean I don't set deadlines anymore because I've broken so many. I don't I'm not going to give a date on anything. Either. Yeah, so it's like. It's going to happen. That's one of those things where there's a lot of pressure, and I'm down with it. Everyone's down with it, and I just got to do it.
All right.
So yeah, it'll slowly the game will get better.
All right.
Well, I think that should be it. I want to thank you. That was fascinating. You're pretty well spoken, I must say. And
I was worried that because we never spoke to you, so we didn't know what you sounded like or anything. So
you never know because I mean someone who's working on a project like this, you drag them out of their cave, they might just hiss at the sunlight or something.
Yeah.
But to all our listeners out there, you should at least look at this game because the depths are kind of staggering. If you got any indication from the last hour or so.
Yeah, look at the wiki. Read that boat murdered, like you killed somebody in the past tense thread. People tend to get introduced from that game. They kind of get hooked on it. Reading forum threads and stuff. And if that's one way to enjoy the game without even playing it, until because the interface is coming. It's not coming in your lifetime, but it's coming. And so eventually you'll be able to actually play the game. But until then, I mean, it's something fun. It's like watching a movie or something. Just enjoying what's going on.
This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via Odeo. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.